In 1807, a Tennessee farmer shot at an animal in his cornfield that didn't match any species alive. Within weeks, invisible hands were pulling his children's hair out of their scalps at night. Within 3 years, that same farmer would be dead, and a voice no one could see would take credit for killing him. Today, his farm gets called the most documented haunting in American history. Almost none of the documentation exists. John Bell, Sr. was a respected farmer and church elder in Robertson County, Tennessee, when he came across a strange dog-like creature in his cornfield in the summer of 1807. It had the head of a rabbit and a body that matched nothing his neighbors could name. He fired on it. It vanished into the corn rows like it had never been there. Within days, his family started hearing knocking on the outside walls at night, then scratching, coming from inside walls where nothing could physically fit. At first, they blamed rats. Then came the part no one could explain away that easily. The sheets were pulled off beds while children lay in them. Pillows were yanked out from under sleeping heads. Chains seemed to drag across the floorboards with no chains in the house. And soon, something started pulling hair, hard enough to leave the children in tears. Hard enough that Bell's youngest daughter, Betsy, bore the worst of it, night after night, for reasons no one in the family could explain. Within a year, the presence stopped just scratching and started talking. Witnesses described a voice that could whisper, sing, quote scripture, and argue theology with visiting ministers well enough to win the argument. It claimed different identities depending on who was listening, and it seemed to know private details about the family and their neighbors that no outsider should have had access to. It focused its cruelty almost entirely on 2 people in the house, John Bell and Betsy. Bell's health started failing in ways his doctors couldn't diagnose. His face twitched uncontrollably. His jaw locked shut for hours at a time, and he struggled to eat solid food. Betsy fared worse in a different way. She was slapped, pinched, and stuck with what witnesses described as invisible pins, sometimes hard enough to draw blood, and the attacks seemed to intensify whenever a young man came calling on her. The family kept it quiet at first, ashamed and afraid of what people would say. That didn't last. Neighbors started coming to see it for themselves, and the voice, by every account, seemed to enjoy having an audience more than it enjoyed anything else. In 1820, John Bell was found in a stupor he couldn't be roused from. A small vial of unidentified liquid was discovered near him, and the family, desperate and out of options, tested a single drop of it on the family cat. The cat reportedly died almost instantly. Bell died shortly after, and the story says the voice sang a triumphant, mocking song at his own funeral, openly claiming the poisoning as its work. This is the part of the story you've probably already heard, that Andrew Jackson himself rode out to witness the haunting, that his wagon froze solid on the road to the farm for no reason anyone could find, that he later said he'd rather face the entire British Army a second time than spend one more night on that property. It's the single most repeated detail in every retelling of this story, in every YouTube video and every haunted Tennessee listicle. It also has no source contemporary to the events at all. No contemporary record survives from the years 1807 through 1821. None of those records place Jackson anywhere near the Bell farm. The story appears for the first time in 1894, in a book written more than 70 years after the fact, during a nationwide wave of spiritualist mania, by a man who claimed to be transcribing a manuscript that no historian has ever been able to independently verify ever existed. So if the most famous witness never showed up, what's actually underneath this story? One theory has outlasted every other explanation historians have tried. A neighboring widow named Kate Batts believed John Bell had cheated her in a land deal years earlier, and reportedly said so publicly and bitterly long before any of this started. The witch voice, whenever it was pressed for a name, sometimes claimed to be exactly her. In a small, tightly connected 1810s farming community, standing up and accusing a living neighbor of witchcraft outright could get you sued, or worse, could make you the town outcast for the rest of your life. But letting an unseen spirit make that same accusation for you carried no such risk at all. No one could sue a voice. No one could shame it into silence. Then there's Betsy. She was the one the entity tormented most violently and most consistently. And she was also the one whose engagement to a local man, Joshua Gardner, mysteriously and completely collapsed around this same period. The story goes that the voice threatened outright violence against Gardner if the marriage went ahead, and the engagement was broken off soon after. A teenage girl, living under the total authority of her father's household, whose own romantic future was destroyed by a force that conveniently could never be interrogated, argued with, or held accountable by anyone in the community. Draw your own conclusion about who actually benefited from taking her ability to say no away from her. 200 years later, the Bell Farm is a paid cave tour that runs lantern-lit visits after dark. Adams, Tennessee hosts an annual Bell Witch Festival with reenactments and vendor stalls. The legend has directly inspired at least 2 feature films, and it's been retold in books, podcasts, and paranormal shows more times than anyone has bothered to count. And through all of it, the same claim keeps getting repeated as settled fact, article after article, video after video. Most documented haunting in American history. But the documentation almost entirely traces back to one book, published for profit in 1894, during a spiritualism boom that rewarded exactly this kind of story. Built on a manuscript that no living historian has ever laid eyes on. Strip that single book away, and what's left isn't a ghost story at all. It's a land dispute nobody could prove, a sick man nobody could properly diagnose, and a teenage girl who never once got the chance to explain herself in her own words, dressed up 70 years later as something far safer for everyone else to believe. If you think you know a haunting, there's a good chance you only know the version someone decided to sell you. Subscribe for the next one we take apart. And if you want to see how the ghost hunter behind England's most famous haunting staged his own evidence from the ground up, go watch our Borley Rectory video next.